Sorry. Hello. My name's Stephen. I'm from Eden Brown Recruitment, and as Mark said, we specialise in charities and recruitment across a number of different disciplines. However, we are not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about Julie Roberts. Sorry, we're having a joke about names earlier. So Julie's going to be speaking to us today about the understanding, listen and resonate future of fundraising. With over a decade of experience in the charity sector, Julie recognises an expert in digital communications, fundraising and the event online fundraising sphere. So, without further ado, big round of applause please.
Oh no, I've got to follow that. Okay. Hello everybody. My name is Julie Roberts and I'm the Director at More Strategic UK. We actually are based in the UK and Australia. So tonight I want to talk to you a little bit about some case studies here in the UK but also in Australia. Because quite interestingly, some of this stuff, they're further ahead of the game than in the UK. So what do we do at More UK? So we help charities understand, grow and create great experiences, and that is what tonight is all about. So, embedding CX principles, what is that all about? So, we like to say we should really move to dialogue journeys, we call them dialogue journeys, because it really is a two-way conversation. And for many, many years we've only been talking at our supporters rather than engaging them and having a direct conversation with them. And this is a really important shift in your fundraising approach. And it doesn't matter what size organisation you are, whether you're small or large, or whether you're in fundraising, campaigning, volunteering, the same principles exist. To create a great customer experience, you can do this in 3 very simple steps. And that's by understanding them, listening to what they're saying to you, and resonating with them by reflecting on what you've heard from them. Now those 3 points sound very simple, but not many people do it right. So it sounds very simple. But before we start, what is CX all about? Okay, so let's just watch this clip.
Okay, now for a second. Now for doing cappuccino, please. You have to put you on hold while I'm translating content. She said just put your foot to the coffee pot, and I don't quite get it. Coffee pot, sorry, you've got to do long. Would you like to have an application for some food or drink today? Just need the first line of your address and your last name to name. While I translate to the Oh, blimey, that's completely on my reach. I think I've lost that one. Reserve the right to cancel your fish and chips without prior notification. Cappuccino's £10.
£6. There'll be £100 of unnecessary charges. And then the rest is unnecessary charges. Afraid I can't do a separate payment. Pull around the bar. I look over a conversation.
Eventually I feel a bit angry and I want to give up.
Wherever you go, if you pay for a service and it was bad, you wouldn't go back. The service was absolutely terrible, and I thought I'd never come back again.
Thank you for your custom today. Would you like to have a short survey or feedback?
Okay. So that's maybe not the best way to do customer experience. But it's customer experience. The reason why it's so important is because it's incredibly important to build a loyal and committed supporter base. And if you don't show them that you are going to take them on an incredible journey with you, like that, where you can see it clearly is done so wrong, where people just accept the way that banks treat you. However, if you take it out of context, you put it in a bank, in a pub, it looks so incredibly wrong. Okay. Now that's how we can get it really wrong really quickly, because we just assume that some of our supporters will always be committed to us, and that's not always the case. So the first thing I want to talk about tonight, so step number 1, is about understanding your supporters. So, and the reason why this is so important, okay, so before I go on, how many people in the room know that your organisation make assumptions about your supporters? Okay, so that's like way over half the room. Okay, I can't tell you how many people I work with. Even when I was charity side, we used to make massive assumptions. Oh yeah, I know all of our supporters will absolutely love this, even though we're talking about 50-year-olds and I'm 20 or whatever at the time. So it's so easy to slip into that, and you're not alone. Everybody thinks like that. So the simplest first step that I can recommend to everybody is to go out there and bust some myths. Okay. So in your organisation, get a cross section of people who you work with. Sit down and start to establish 3 things. What you know, what you think you know. So what you know is data, okay? What you've got in your database, what you can quantify. What you think you know, so great conversations that you have with your supporters all the time. On the phone, in face-to-face meetings, whatever it is, you might have the same conversation over and over again. So you know it, you just don't write it anywhere, okay? And then the last thing, evidence that you know you need to find out. So that is busting some of these myths, but you just make massive assumptions that is the way that they think you feel, right? Once you've identified that in 3 columns, then you can know very quickly how you need to go out and research, gain research evidence to answer the questions around what you don't know. That will formulate what research you need to do with your supporters. So a really great example is I had the pleasure and absolute privilege of working with Pancreatic Cancer UK. They wanted to understand more about their supporters. So we took them through this session, we held a Mythbusters session, we sat down cross-organisationally and went through that exact process. What do you know, what do you think you know, and what is evidence you need to find? That then helped us formulate what questions I needed to go out and talk to the supporters about through in-depth interviews. That was the first piece of real research they've ever done with their supporters. And one of the key things to come out was this. So we understood really quickly how we could start to build some of these dialogue journeys. And it wasn't about what activity they've done. It was actually more importantly about where they were on their pancreatic cancer journey, which might sound really obvious, but that wasn't the way that they were communicating to their supporters. And what connection they had. So we come up with these 4 broad motivational groups. So we had active seekers, so these were people that were in the early stages of diagnosis or their loved ones were in the early stages, and they just needed to know information. They didn't want to know anything else. They're not ready for that conversation yet. The second was around the change makers. So for a lot of these, it's shortly after loss. And what they wanted to do is that this is just outrageous that so many people die of pancreatic cancer, which is 1 in 4 in a month, I'd like to tell you. People, I was very shocked by that. And so then they were like, they just were saying, we're happy to do anything, tell us. Tell me what to do, I'm ready. Which they clearly weren't having that conversation with these people. The third group was about repaying relatives. So these are the people that, again, had lost someone, but wanted to get involved with memory giving in some way, and just needed their life to be easier. Just tell me how I'll give you some money, and I just need to go and breathe. And the last set was the powerless peers. So these are the people that, again, have lost someone but wanted to do something active. They wanted to do a run. They wanted to do a trek. They wanted to hold their own bakes out. And again, we never spoke to them in these simple steps. So that's why it was really crucial for us to really understand that supporter base. And then from there, we backed that up with the quantitative side to start building personas. Now, personas are not a new thing. These have been around for a very long time. But the crucial element about creating personas, and what not a lot of people do anymore, it's to help you not think like you anymore. It's to think like Beverly. Because now I'm Beverly, I'm 56, looking good for my age, and I'm a repaying relative. So everything that I'm thinking about when I'm developing something, that I'm talking to Beverly about, I feel like her. How would I feel if I was 56 and I'd just lost someone, blah, 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 blah. And that's how we constantly thought about how we created that journey for this particular motivational groups. So that was one step. The second step is listening. So once you've understood your audience, you go into listen mode. Now this, who knows what this is? Gentlemen? Sir? Do you know what it is?
Well, basically, we are looking at what people do, when they do it, and what's the emotional context behind it.
Yes, that is absolutely bang on the money. Well done, you. I'll buy you a beer after. So this is what we call an empathy map. So the crucial part about this is when you create journeys, you don't just think about A to Z. They start here, they go there. The most important factor is the attitudinal line, which is the top line on the yellow. Okay, how are they feeling at each point in the journey? Okay, that is the first thing. The second thing is looking at on stage and backstage. So on stage is the direct face-to-face or on the phone relationship they're having with your organisation. And backstage is the part that everybody forgets. This is the nuts and bolts of the journey. This is what is happening, what's going into your database. This is what email's going out. Who is answering that email that comes back in? This is the process side that I cannot tell you how many sessions I've run with charities and they go, oh yeah, that email. Who actually answers that email? It's quite scary if you don't understand who is responding to your supporters at every step of the journey. And then on top of that, the next thing, once you've mapped this out, is looking at that attitudinal line. Okay, so what are the moments that matter? The highs and the lows. So once you've started to think like Beverly and you walk along and you go, yeah, she's feeling really proud at this moment. And that empathy map, by the way, is a real map that I did with Dementia UK, which are here today somewhere. Yay, hello. So that, that was real. And so we realised at one point in the journey they felt really super proud of what they'd done. And we needed to monopolise that, and we were. And the other part was when they were having a nice time, but they were feeling really stressed about the event that was just about to come up. So if we weren't communicating to them at that point, they could have just decided, I'm not going to go ahead with it. So it's really important to recognise those really important moments that matter, because this is when your innovation stream starts to kick in. So you start to look at these moments that matter and go, okay, how can I optimise the positive attitudes? How can I change the negative attitudes? So you go through there and you'll start to innovate on those key moments that matter. They are trigger points for your innovation. So this is us, Dementia UK, doing the empathy mapping. Okay, so it's simple as sitting down as a team, looking at your persona, you've done your research, you know who you're talking about, you know who you've got to think about, literally going through the journey as it is, looking at the on-stage, the backstage, and then applying the attitudinal part. Once you've done that, you then need to look at the positive and negative moments within that journey. Once you've done that, you will know straight away where you need to start and interject within that journey. Is that clear? Yeah? Excellent. Okay. So the last step in the piece is really about resonate. And this for me is the most exciting part of the 3-step process. And the reason for that is because it's really where you start applying everything that you've learned from going into research, doing the empathy mapping, really understanding your supporters, to applying that and showing your supporter base that you actually really understand them and you care. And that's the most important thing, because if you can show that, you are delivering a great customer experience, because that's all they want to know. They want to know that you get them, you understand why they support you, and they want you to tell them the difference that they are making. Okay, and that's the real crucial part about this. So this is where I wanted to talk to you about a case study in Australia. So we worked really closely, and we still do to this day, with the Salvation Army. So just a small charity, but they, every year in Australia, they do a door knock appeal. Does anyone still do a door knock appeal in the UK?
Salvation Army.
Just the Salvation Army. Okay, fair enough. Good job of talking about this then. So, they came to us and said, we're having a slight issue. We need to sort out all these 4 things, just really small things, like we need to get more people to actually do it. We need to get them to make more money. We need to keep those people, and we need to identify who our VIPs were. We're like, okay, brilliant, just a small job then. So that was quite a big challenge for us. And everybody knew about the Red Shield appeal, but to continually recruit and do that every year was really, really hard for even the size of the Salvation Army, which everybody knows, like their brand awareness is huge. So, what do we do to make sure that we were listening to our supporters? The first thing we did was we started to embed what we call the feedback loop. Okay, so does anyone know what a feedback loop is? Anyone heard of a feedback loop? Yeah? Okay. Basically all it is it's a really simple way to create a survey and then you get responses. Okay, so it's basically showing that you are listening to your audience. You're giving them a chance to understand them and listen to their responses. And so we did this in 2 ways. We did it through an email survey and we did it through SMS. Okay, so it's instant response. And the reason why we did that was because we really wanted to understand how committed and, more importantly, how confident they were about door knocking. Now that sounds really silly, but how many of you here would happily go and knock on all your neighbours' doors and ask for money? Okay, no hands. Right, so it's quite hard, so you can understand why their retention's going down, why they find it hard to recruit, and really interestingly, they recruit through telemarketing. So when they recruit people, they will recruit them on the lowest level possible. So they'll just say, oh yeah, all we need is like 30 minutes of your time. But once we started doing all the analysis, I mean, no surprises, if you only door knock for 30 minutes, you don't make as much money if you door knock for 2 hours. I mean, it's not rocket science, but if you're selling them in on that principle from the beginning, it's not going to help you raise that bar throughout. So, the first thing, understand commitment and confidence. So we developed this. So this was really to understand the value drivers. Okay, so the results were so interesting. We identified that there was 4 kind of groups of people that answered the surveys. But the 2 that were really the value drivers and that were going to answer some of those objectives, those challenges that they come to us about, was the VIPs, not surprisingly, and priority group number 1. So that was the people who had basically said they're not very confident in door knocking. So when we looked at VIPs, these were the top 10% that when we asked them, how much money they were going to commit to raising. These were the ones that on average it was $90, just to let you know what the average was. But when we asked them how much they would be willing to commit to say that they would raise, the ones that responded to the higher average of $90, they fell in naturally into the VIP group. So we knew that they were more committed to the cause just by answering that one question in the survey. So they just straight away went into a completely different journey. The second group that I want to talk about tonight is priority group number 1. And these were the people that are identified that they basically weren't very confident about going ahead and knocking on all the doors down their street, which fair enough, I would definitely fall in that pot. But we found out that the difference between people who were confident and not confident was a 20% difference in the amount that they fundraised. So that's a huge chunk of money. So nearly a third difference in income between whether they were confident or not confident. So we knew straight away that the main thing we needed to do to show that we understood that they're not feeling confident was to create a coaching journey to help them feel more confident that they could go out and knock on someone's door and know what to say and get the answers. So this is where we started looking at our second loop, if you like. And that's where we started to develop our coaching journey. So it comprised of 15 questions, and it went out to volunteers just only several days before they were due to actually go and knock on people's doors. And they went through a series of questions which we call pitch, practice and nudge. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute. But it was just standard questions like, are you ready? Do you know what you've got to say? Do you know what you've got to do? And so then they just went for a series of coaching, Q&A basically. And we could see how many people had gone through the series of emails and how many people had dropped out and what people were really getting advice on or not. Now from just doing that coaching journey, we saw an uplift of 14% in the amount that they fundraised. So they just felt more confident that we just hand-delivered direct comms to them about what they need to say, what they need to do, how long they should be out there for, and it was really surprising that all of that was done by email. So nothing fancy, no massive resource needed, it was just that it was very timely and we understood what the needs were. So the other thing in the survey that was really interesting was that we started to test some of the behavioural economics tactics. And the first tactic that we used was around anchoring. So, does anyone know what I mean by anchoring? Anyone brave enough to answer that? No? Yeah, at the back?
Wait, it's when everybody does, the standard is to do this.
Yeah.
Therefore, that encourages people to then base themselves and their behavior based on what they see as the norm.
Yeah, so it was based, so that's more, I suppose, in the norm section, but anchoring is more around saying, it was making them commit, basically, to, we asked them a question around what was the average you were going to collect. And by getting the supporter to agree that, and they felt that they'd committed to that, the ones, when they answered that, they actually raised $10 to $20 more. So by making them, you're anchoring them to a fixed price, if you like, and they feel that they have to do that because they've committed themselves to that. But they don't feel like they've been pushed in a pushy way because it was totally their decision. We just asked the question. And then the second tactic that we used was, to your point, exactly what you said, around norming. So it's kind of like, most people do this. So they only got asked that if we asked that question around, and you can see it here. How long do you estimate it would take you to door knock your houses? So if they answered any less than this one, 2 hours, so if they answered, I don't know, about 30 minutes, about an hour, then they went on to this slide by SMS. And we said, most people actually door knock for 2 hours. So then it makes them think, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I should do a bit more. And interestingly, the results from that showed that for the 20% of people who responded to this SMS, they actually went out and raised an average of 25% more because they were out there longer. So it just shows if you position your comms in such a way, it will shift the dynamics of what they actually do for you. So it's really simple. We weren't asking to do anything different. We just positioned it in a way that they felt like, oh, well, if most people do that, then maybe I should do that too. Which was different to the tactic that was being used when they were recruited. When they were recruited at the lowest level possible, which was 30 minutes. And then through the journey, we were uplifting them to make sure that they were doing it for 2 hours or more, because that's where we saw the biggest income lift. So then the last thing I want to talk about is around AI. So this is what we're actually talking a lot with supporters about at the moment. And this really is a combination of all those 3 steps. So it's understanding, listening and resonated all on one platform at one time within one journey. And a lot of this is done not by your staff, it's actually a chatbot. Okay, so you basically pre-program FAQs. So how many people run an events or a community program here? Okay, so there's quite a few. How many times do you get asked the same question over and over again? Do you have a t-shirt? Do you have this side? I mean, I've worked for many, many years in community and events. And I was just like, if I could put myself on record right now, I could have done 50 other things. So this is the beauty of this. Now, we're using this quite a lot in Australia. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to share one of the case studies because it hasn't gone live. But with a big pink charity, there we go. And they are using this to engage their supporters by having what it feels like a very personalised conversation about their fundraiser. And they are being sent video content from the team that's pre-done. And it really feels like we are listening, we're understanding their pain, we're listening to how they're responding, and we're feeding back to them that we have listened to that and here's the answer to the next thing. And it's all done whilst you're doing something else. So this is the most dynamic change in dialogue journeys that we're seeing. Now, SMS is not a new channel, but not many people use it with support care. And it can really help your front line. So this is what I mean. It doesn't matter whether you're small or large, you can still do all this stuff. You don't need huge teams to be able to shift dialogue journeys. And it's absolutely crucial that we think like that. So just to wrap up the session tonight, the 3 simple steps of embedding the future of fundraising are as simple as understand, listen and resonate. So understand them, identify what you know, what you think you know and the evidence you need to find. Listen, so listen to what they are saying to you, not what you think they're saying to you, actually listen to them. Create empathy maps, okay? Remember that attitudinal line. Make sure you think like your supporters, not like you. And the last area is resonate, okay? So reflect back what you've heard from them. Show them that you're listening to what they're saying to you. So identify the core segments, listen to that feedback, put them into relevant segments and deliver content that your supporter wants to hear, not what you want to tell them. So it's a really simple 3-step process that we use all the time with our clients, and it really helps the support experience model. And this is where you can show the future of fundraising, of where you understand, listen and resonate. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions? It's on, you're asking Australia, how long does it take that impact to happen? Because the effects go in.
long did it take from when you first met the firm to actually see the impact?
The salvos. Like literally, so it took us a while to get to understand their data because it was the first time that they've been doing a donor bill for so many years. They were like, here's 20 years of data. So it was quite interesting to just have that time to trawl through it. But actually, once the stats started coming through, it was literally like a 6-week period that we started to we understood it, and then we just went live with it. Because until you go live and you start to understand what people are talking to you, you can tweak you can tweak this stuff really, really quickly. So we're like, oh, no one's listening to the third coaching email. Quick, change it. We could do that. You can't do it when it's like a traditional DM pack. You send it out, you wait a month later. Oh, we've had a check-in, and it's gone, So this is the whole point of this: is it's live, and you test, and you change, and you keep going. And we're still doing it to this day. We're still testing. We're still changing the dialogue journeys. We're still testing different things in different groups. So I only spoke about 2 priority groups there, but we did a load of other work with the other 2 priority groups. And we've actually seen, as we've gone around different state and territories with them, it's different. So whether you live in Sydney or you live in Adelaide, it's completely different. So that's also been quite an interesting learning curve as well, but a great one. Yeah.
Sorry, this is kind of unrelated, but I'm sure that's
Oh, well.
Why do you work in
So we're based here in London, and we've also got another team in Australia. So it's just 2 guys. It is, but culturally it is, but culturally the same. So in terms of fundraising, so it's really interesting that whenever we do analysis, we always look at the UK, Australia and Canada, because they are very similar in the way we fundraise. When you start looking at the States and countries like that, it's a whole different ballgame. We shouldn't benchmark against the States because they're so massive and they are so different in every state, it's unbelievable. But we found when we started to work in those 3 territories, it really started to help us understand fundraisers. And also, that because, most Tommies came from the motherland and went over there, there's this just natural relationship between, there's so many charities that are here and there, like the Heart Foundation, the list is endless. And the events have been sold from here and there, so that's why we have a team here and a team there. Plus, the 2 guys that set up More Strategic are English and now live in Australia. So they got it right and I got it wrong. So I Any other questions? Okay, brilliant. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much indeed. Julie, I thought that was really interesting. And I think it's so true, isn't it? You see that all the time, that organisations make that assumption about what their donor looks like, and it sounds like a lot of common sense to me. But thank you very much, Julie. Just a final word. Our next first Thursday in December will be our kind of festive first Thursday, so we'll certainly be inspired. We hope you can join us for that event. And it will be a panel discussion on legacy led by Stephen Jules, so that will be, I think, a really compelling evening, so please make sure that you're here. If you could clear up your glasses as you go, it would be much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed for attending our first Thursday. Thank you.